First, I wanted to thank you all for inviting me to share this reception with you today. And I do miss the spring rolls. Next time, I'm sure. But I want to thank everyone for being here for such an important event and for such an important organization. It never ceases to amaze me how pervasive heart disease continues to be in a country like the United States that may feel that they're most powerful and above things, and yet we're still humans at the end of the day, and we still have disease that we can mitigate and take care of. So today I'm going to talk about mental health, and you can go ahead and advance the next slide. I am currently working for Optum Alaska. Previous to that, I was working at the behavioral health unit at the hospital, and have been quite happy to take any opportunity to talk about mental health. So go ahead, next slide. Mental health issues are extremely pervasive, and prior to COVID-19, most everyone, if they had not personally experienced having an episode of a mental health disorder, could at least identify someone in their life that has suffered from such an illness. As the coronavirus has rolled out and so many significant changes have occurred, those episodes have increased, even in people who are ordinarily very well functioning, just because of the changes and the significant stresses that all of us are under, from homeschooling children, if you're not typically accustomed to that, to dealing with the stress of the current social injustices and safety concerns in areas that have been impacted. What's interesting to know, I'm just going to talk about some numbers, is that 1 in 5 adults in the US experience mental illness, and 1 in 25 experience what's defined as severe mental illness, so requiring significant intervention. What's even more concerning is that 17% of teenagers, actually children from age 6 to 17, will experience a lifetime mental health disorder. And 50% of all of these illnesses, a lifetime, begin before the age of 14. And when you take a broader step back and look at the families, 20% of parents have a mental illness. So if you think about the stress that ordinarily people are under, and then layer on top of that the stresses related to COVID and financial and economic impacts, lack of social activities and means that people typically use to relieve stress, you can imagine that the stress has just been compounded. And in those families that already have an impacted parent, children really can be impacted. In total, there's approximately 8.4 million adults or individuals in the United States who have to provide care to an adult with a mental health or emotional disorder. And those caregivers of adults, on average, spend 32 hours per week providing unpaid care because their loved one is so significantly impacted. That impacts our workforce and economy as well. And as you can see on the slide, it is prevalent in all ethnicities, and as well as sexual preferences. Those that belong to groups that may have higher pressures and higher social injustices obviously have more mental illness or risk of more mental illness. Next slide. So as we talked about, mental health issues impact economy because people are less likely to be able to go to work. They're more likely to rely on unhealthy coping strategies such as alcohol or substances, which increase absenteeism and decrease work production. And in general, behavioral health care makes up more than 20% of total healthcare spending. If you allow me to get on my soapbox for 30 seconds, I'll tell you that in our country, reimbursement for mental health providers does not equate to 20%. So in other words, in our country, the way we reimburse for healthcare, surgeries and other physical interventions get a higher reimbursement rate. And so typically communities struggle to meet financial demands of the mental health population. And frequently, these are not voting members of the community. So they struggle to have advocates that can help them get the societal impact that is important that other groups may have. Next slide. Obviously, a mental health disorder goes well if it's untreated. And what ends up happening with the US is that when we ignore and isolate individuals with substance use disorders or mental health disorders, we end up seeing the cost effects in other areas, including in incarceration, in Department of Justice, in Department of Corrections. We see it in the need for addressing homelessness. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but it's also impacting homelessness in children and adolescents. So it's important to not neglect this illness. Next slide. Because this is so prevalent and so many people experience this disease, you would think that many people get treatment, and unfortunately that's not true. I think many of you are aware of the stigma associated with mental health disorders and how many people struggle to admit or share links or have family member experience a substance use disorder or a mental health disorder. Next slide. So what I talk about what can you do, and a disclaimer that all the things I'm going to talk about, what you can do for your mental health disorder or how to be mentally healthy, actually applies to your cardiovascular fitness. And I would love at some point to come back and talk about how the fascinating way mental health disorders and cardiovascular disorders overlap, and how there's even some really fascinating interactions with antidepressants and what they do to platelets and the benefit they have post-stroke and post-MI, and your risk of having depression and what that does for your long-term outcome post-MI. It's amazing. As much as we like to kind of categorize our body, it's all one big system, and if one part of the body is needing to recover, the whole system needs to be on board for the best outcome. So first off, everybody should be exercising, but you've got to be realistic. If you're not walking currently, don't plan to do a marathon next month, because you're just going to hate it. You're going to feel like it's drudgery. You need to keep it fun and vary your exercise, whether that's varying the schedule or varying what type of exercise you can do. And make sure you schedule it in a way that you're more likely to keep the schedule. So for me personally, I tend to be most successful if I'm up before my kids or anyone else is up in my house, and I have 30 or 45 minutes of my time to do whatever workout I choose to do. The other thing that helps keep me motivated is I have an accountability buddy. So I'm not getting out of my house much these days, but I have a friend that I report to every day, and I tell her what I've done for exercise. And I know that if I don't send her the message, she's going to reach out to me and say, "What are you doing, you slut? You know, I've already done my bike training that she does." So it helps keep me accountable, and that's important, because sometimes I don't always have the motivation. I know that it's the right thing to do, but I don't always do it. Okay, next slide. So there's increasing evidence that what we eat has a direct impact on our mood and our overall mental wellness, in addition to our physical wellness. And in addition to what we eat, when and how we eat is also equally important. So there's a growing body of research on anti-inflammatory diets and intermittent fasting. And when I went to medical school, these are things like that didn't even exist back then. Now it's actually being incorporated into medical school curriculum, which is really impressive to me, because that means that there is a body of research that actually substantiates it. So you definitely want to eat a wide variety of foods with lots and lots of colors. And the most current research is suggesting that natural foods that are harvested locally are the best for you. So yay, Alaska, right? I mean, we have wild animals in our yard. Sometimes they're eating our garden, which is a little unfortunate, but we have access. We have access to moose and to salmon and to halibut and all of these wonderful things. So it's really important. Another plug for fermentation. Fermentation is a really cool thing that helps introduce not only probiotics, but prebiotics, and it really can impact the inflammatory process in our body. And then the last pointer is try to avoid eating 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep. So how do you get good sleep? Well, I believe you've got to keep a schedule. And I know many people, and myself years ago, would get in this habit of cutting it short during the week and then on the weekends trying to catch up for it. Or I might stay up too late on the weekends and then change my wake up time on the next, the following morning, which then made Sunday nights hard to get back in the routine. So as much as possible, you want to keep a schedule and keep it consistent. I'm also a big believer in sleep hygiene. So I really don't believe that we should have televisions in our bedroom. And I'll admit that I do look at my cell phone when I'm in my bed, but that's one of those things also that if you really want to be practiced at good rest, you really should put it away because it activates the parts of our brain that aren't supposed to be turned on when we're trying to sleep. And often, poor sleep is one of the first early indicators of mental health disorders. And for people prone to anxiety, that 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. wake up in the middle of the night where your eyes pop wide open and suddenly you're thinking about this worry that you had managed to distract yourself from all day long. Now you can't distract yourself because you were sleeping and now you're wide awake. So the more you can address that during the day, the better you'll sleep, and the better you'll sleep, the less anxious you'll feel the following day. Next slide. So these are some really cool apps that are available online, ranging in costs and ranging in who they apply to. The Moshi Twilight for Kids is a really cool app that helps provide meditations focused towards children. They provide some bedtime stories. Headspace is really cool because they've reduced prices for people who currently aren't employed, knowing what's happening with COVID. And it's got guided relaxation and some sleep strategies. Mindshift is super popular. It's free. It is more of a CBT based, as is Sanvello. So different options that I think, our phone is with us all the time, and it's helpful to download those apps if you want something short of professional help. Next slide. And so just in summary, we want to focus on stress management for our mind, body, and emotions. In our mind, really just accepting the things, many of them we can't change. What we can change is how we think about them. We can think about, rather than the stress of staying at home, the concern about the economy and our financial forecast, we can take a moment to be thankful for the long days of the summer that we have currently. We can be thankful for time that we have at home to maybe tackle tasks that we don't usually do. In our body, we really have to prioritize taking good care of the machine that we live in, right? I mean, we really have to, just like we do good car maintenance, we have to take care of our body if we want it to last. And emotions, whether you want to look at them or not, they're there and they pop up at inopportune times. So if you don't take a look at them, if you don't put a name to the feeling that you're having, if you don't take a moment, maybe not in the moment, but later, and figure out why did what she said make me so angry, then it will catch you later. So really exploring those feelings and processing. And then obviously treatment is available. Treatment is available locally as well as through national organizations, Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. We have lots of great practitioners in the state, and their doors are open. And the cool thing about the state right now is that there are these virtual practices that are opening up, or that have been opened. And so it's super cool that even if you don't want to physically go to a clinic, and many people prior to COVID didn't want to go to a mental health clinic, and I get that. Now you don't have to. You can hop on your Zoom or whatever your app of choice is, and you can connect with a real human being that can help you work through what you need to take care of yourself. Next slide. All right, that's it. If there's any questions, you can throw them in the chat box, or you can email me after. Thank you.